baseball's going on. Well, and the high holidays, and it always happens, and the Dodgers are always in the. But how do you like? How do you even with everything else going on? It's kind of ridiculous, and that actually was obviously part of the problem with the Jewish Community Day was that um on one hand they didn't have it partly because of the situation going on right now, the war going on, but on the other hand, how do you make a big deal about it when everything else is going on? So, I talked to some people in the Jewish community about it, and I'm like, is this something we should get agitated? Like the Federation, I talked to people in the Federation. I'm like, yeah, do I make a big deal about this? Because in the scheme of things, this is not really something, this is ridiculous. So that was the other thing. On the other hand, like would they really be doing this if the war wasn't going on? And number two, would they my point to some extent was we really need it this year because the Dodgers need to support the Jewish community who's always supported them. So that's why I posted what the Vikings said 2 days ago on October 7th, and I posted that, and I was proud of it. And I looked around, by the way, I didn't see any other sporting franchise, definitely I didn't look at every football and baseball. I don't want somebody to get at me and say, oh, they posted, but none of the teams I saw, and especially a team right now that's 5-0 did that, and they took flack for it. I mean, I saw the comments that were coming on Instagram. They were brutal. They were vicious. Some of them were funny, but a lot of them were just not nice. And so they took a lot of heat for it. Now I posted it up, and of course, my good friend, my student, Miles Rubin, who's in Gaza right now fighting, says, hey, the statement said something about Islamophobia in the same sentence. And I said, I responded back to Miles, whose family, Scott Rubin, his dad just did a movie about the Bills. I said, where was the Bills statement on October 7th? I said, the statement finished with the words, we need to pray for the release of 101 hostages. I think that's pretty significant. The fact that they talked about anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, I mean, look, everyone has to say that now. I'm not making an excuse for it. I'm not saying that, the perpetrators of this are not doing it in Islam, but you can't say that without talking about it, about calling out Islamophobia, and there is. And by the way, I don't know that I'm not Islamophobic, if you ask me honestly, because I'm scared. What does it mean? I'm scared of it, and I am scared. I'm scared that somebody in the name of Islam will do something to me. I'm very scared about that, by the way. That's not a minor thing, by the way, that you should know. So I wouldn't say I'm Islamophobic necessarily in the sense that as a sense of hating Muslims, but am I scared? Yeah. But nobody says, right? No one's saying it's Judeophobic. Nobody says they're Judeophobic. Right? That means I'm scared of Jews. Nobody's scared of Jews. I mean, most people aren't scared of Jews. I don't know many people that are just scared of. They're scared of Jews. But yeah, you're right, Joyce. The only people scared of Jews are Hamas and Hezbollah right now. Right. But yeah, Jew fear we don't usually talk about. Jew hatred we talk about, but Jew fear we don't talk about. But look, I'm not going to split hairs. Clearly, Islamophobia has come to mean the equivalent of anti-Semitism. Yeah, and they didn't have to do it. They could have done what every other team did and just said nothing, which is what the Dodgers did. It's what the Rams did. It's what the Chargers did. It's what every team in LA did. The Lakers, the Clippers, none of them said anything about it. Yeah, I don't know. You know what? I didn't look, honestly, I didn't look at every New York team. What do they do? They did. They got rid of Robert Saleh. I know he put on the Lebanese flag. It's the last thing I'll say about. Oh, look, Philip's texting us right now. Philip just said they are afraid of Jews. Yes, they are. But yes, Robert Saleh got fired. Robert Saleh got fired. He wore a Lebanon flag on his jersey. You didn't know that? Oh yeah, I'll show it. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you right now, my friends. Oh yeah, no, this was ironically, folks, who were they playing when he was wearing that Lebanon flag, John? Who was he playing? Yep. That was his last game, my friends. The Vikings not only posted something really nice about it, they also.
Rogers forcing him to.
Oh, yeah, right. That's ridiculous. If you believe that, I mean, that's insane. Rodgers got him fired. But yeah, no, I'll show you the I'll show you the Robert Saleh. Here's the jersey right here, my friends. This is what he decided to wear against the Vikings. So so I saw somebody posted something kind of, well, I wouldn't say it's funny, but it was here. This was him in the Viking game. That's Robert Saleh. And there's the Lebanon flag right underneath the, yeah, right underneath the Nike logo.
We control the weather.
And now he's fired. No, I mean, look, the reality is that yes, he's not fired because of that. He's fired because of his 20-36 record. And yeah, the fact that he's lost over the last few years, and that Aaron Rodgers was sick and tired of him. And it's not the first coach that Aaron Rodgers got rid of. So he got rid of Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. So correct. And he did. But you know, look, yes, there's it's not a new thing. You're right. You're right. But Aaron Rodgers has done it consistently, and that's the thing. He's done it on different teams, and he did it this time when the Jets are 2-3 and technically not out of anything because they're one game behind the Bills. But anyways, as John pointed out, goodbye and good riddance to you. And that's what you get. Yes, there are rumors about them. There are rumors that Mike is saying. It's completely unsubstantiated. But now we're getting way into the weeds. So I will tell you, the sports report is over. Now we're going to talk about food, which is also pretty good. Can't go wrong by talking about food. Yes, right before Yom Kippur. No, but these are the laws of how we bless food and how Judaism presents that. So we're actually going to start on Berachot 40a. We're moving into Berachot. The first page 40. This chapter, chapter 6 of the Mishnah, is where we start to get into food blessings. And some of them are kind of obscure. Some of them really don't make any sense. What we're going to look at today, though, I think is very not only relevant because it deals with the concepts of blessing food, which are very important for us. We're going to see that. But also some lessons about food, including a very important lesson we're about to read, which most of you who own animals will be very happy to hear. I don't really care. You can take my dog, and I go back to having no animals in my house. I'm not a vegetarian who hates animals. I just hate animals in my house. That goes for a rat, for a spider, or for a dog. So any of them, none of them. I don't need any animal. No, I don't. I wiped up pee again today. All right. That's 4 years. October will be, this month is 4 years that my dog has lived with me. And I've been wiping up pee for 4 years in my house. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, we paid for a doggy door, Glory. We paid for a fence around the backyard so I don't want to talk about it. The dog has been spoiled rotten, and yeah, he doesn't care. He doesn't. My wife is too good to him. Not too good to me. She's too good to him. She's too good to him. So that's my dog, and he's cute and everything, but he gets away with murder. The worst part is when I get mad at him for peeing on the rug, she'll like comfort him. I'm like, no, it's a dog. You can't do that. I'll never teach him. He doesn't know. All he sees is that you don't think it's a problem. He's getting mixed messages anyways. But here's the halakha. Here's the law of animals. We're going to get to it. So talking about having bread and starting with this concept of saying hamotzi, look at this. Rav said, one who broke bread and before eating it offered a piece to another and said, take it and recite a blessing, take it and recite a blessing, need not recite a blessing a second time, because this is considered to have been for the purpose of a blessing. So if you've said a blessing and you breaking more bread, you don't have to say a blessing personally every time you do it. But if, however, he said, bring salt or bring relish, he must recite the blessing a second time, as that is considered an interruption between the blessing and eating bread. And Rabbi Yochanan said, even if he said, bring salt or bring relish, it is not considered an interruption, and he need not recite a blessing a second time. Only if he said, mix the food for the ox, it is considered an interruption, and he's required to recite a blessing a second time. And Rav Sheshet said, even if he said mix for the oxen, he need not recite a blessing a second time, as that is also considered for the purpose of a blessing. And so what we learn from this is that, generally speaking, well, there's rabbinic differences on this, but whether you have to say a blessing after you've already eaten and then either bring in more bread or do something different with the bread that you hadn't done before, which includes doing things like putting on relish, putting on butter, doing something else with it. But here we get to this really important lesson that I want you to see. Rav said, and that's the guy who said at the beginning, right? That's the same rabbi that they talk about, very important rabbi in the Talmud. One is prohibited from eating before feeding his animals, as it is stated, and I will give grass in your fields for your animals. First and only then, and you shall eat and be satisfied. And so that's from Deuteronomy. That's from Devarim. In this verse, preparation for food for one's cattle precedes preparation of his own food. Consequently, it is considered part of the preparation for one's own meal. So when you sit down to eat, you have to make sure you, what if you're going to eat your dog? I guess he's already been prepared in that case. But if for the, yes, it's not kosher, but for the, let's make that clear. But for this, and ox are, by the way, but yes, clearly they're talking about preparing your food for your animals that are your responsibility. And Judaism teaches us that we have to feed our animals even before we feed ourselves, which teaches us that Judaism always stresses kindness and mercy towards animals. It's an important precept in our religion. Yeah, before we eat them, which is ironic, but we are going to get into, well, a little bit into this concept of what we eat, and even when we eat animals, because eating animals, by the way, you have to remember something. There is no blessing for eating an animal. We're going to get into all the blessings that we say. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, borei pri ha'etz, for eating from the tree, borei pri hagafen, from drinking from the fruit of the vine. We say when we have grapes. We say all these different blessings. Borei pri adamah, for eating vegetables. There is no blessing for eating an animal. There is no blessing. There isn't. There is a blessing over eating anything else, which we're going to get to, which could include, of course, meat, but that is everything. The blessing is, thank you, God, for everything that you've created, which is a generic blessing. And we're going to get into that because the rabbis don't want us to use a generic blessing unless we can't cover it by one of the other blessings. Not definitely, yeah. That's definitely a problem. But you could say a hamotzi over the bun. The fact is that there we do get into this discussion. It will be in the Talmud, is the blessings that we say over certain foods, especially mixes of foods. And in this case, we just actually specifically said, if you put relish on bread, it doesn't change the fact that you're basically saying a hamotzi blessing. So how much relish would that be? Well, if the relish is no longer, again, just relish, but the main ingredient, then maybe it would change it. But we're going to get to that. Right now, though, we're in this really important issue of taking care of our animals. And this is really amazing that the Bible, tells us that we have to, again, this line from Deuteronomy, you wouldn't necessarily know from that you,
giving us food or
well, yeah, they're animals that are goats or yeah, they're animals that are transportation, that are a commodity for eggs or
Right.
wool or anything else. But if they're our responsibility, we have to feed them first. So even animals that we consider to be, part of our economic need, we understood them as life, and we understood that we had to take care of them. So again, you wouldn't know that just by the way the Torah says that you have to give your animals food first, but the rabbis interpret that. They interpret those juxtaposition of those verses as the way the Torah says it, you take care of your animals first. That's why it says it in the Torah. That's why it says animals first, and then you eat and be satisfied. So it's interesting that that is the basis for it. And again, you can, here's the context of it in Deuteronomy. I will grant rain for you in the season, and early rain and late rain, and you shall gather new grain and wine and oil. I will provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and thus you shall eat your fill. Now, in the context of it, it seems to basically be saying, I will take care of animals, and then you're going to be eating and be satisfied. But what's interesting about this is that you wouldn't know from this that we get from these lines that you take care of your animals before you take care of your own needs.
can't take care of themselves.
I will tell you that elsewhere, the rabbis, but yes, but it's not, you wouldn't know it from necessarily reading it, that that's what we're going to get. The rabbis actually also tell us in other parts of the Talmud that if you have a slave, you have to feed the slave before you feed yourself. Yeah. So let's also remember that this is consistent with the Jewish principle that if you're responsible for living things, whether it's an animal or whether it's a person, which they considered them essentially property, that you have to take care of that property before you take care of your own needs. Look, that would dissuade people from having the responsibility of having a slave to some extent, because if they're following the Torah, they have to, or the Jewish tradition, not specifically said in the Torah, but if they're following the halakha, they have to take care of the slave before they take care of their own food, and they know that. By the way, also, if that slave converted to Judaism, they'd have to let that slave go. So all of those things make it very hard to keep slaves in Jewish tradition. So the next halacha, the next law says, Rava bar Shmuel said, in the name of Rabbi Chia, one who breaks bread is not permitted to break it until they bring salt or relish before each and every one seated at the table. However, the Gemara relates that Rava bar Shmuel himself happened to come to the house of the exilarch. They brought him bread, which he immediately broke without waiting for them to bring salt or relish. They said to him, did the master reconsider his halakhic ruling, right? So Rava, have you changed your opinion, your ruling? He said, no. He said to them, although poor quality bread requires salt in order to give the bread flavor, and therefore one must wait before breaking bread, this refined bread in the house of the exilarch needs no salt and does not require waiting. So he said, it depends on the bread you're eating. If you're eating really crummy bread, you better have salt and you better have relish. You better have seasonings on that bread because it's really not edible. And you really don't say the blessing until all that stuff is out on the table, which is weird because like if you didn't eat it, why? Like if I don't have salt on it, why would I have to wait for it? But it tells us that it was so common for people to put something on their bread before they ate it that it's not considered finished until that stuff comes on it. So that's why the previous paragraph kind of doesn't make sense until you read this paragraph, which is, did they have to put relish on it? Well, there were people who said you did. There were people who said that it's not really ready, and no one really is ever going to eat bread until that relish is on it. Which again is salt, pepper, some kind. It's not relish. It's not like relish from the Dodger game. It's not the machine that you crank. What? It could be anything, but it clearly is salt. Here it says salt or relish, but the word in Aramaic is the word in Aramaic is fitan, which is, I mean, it could be rosemary, it could be thyme, it could be any spice. I would say probably spice is better than, but melach is always salt. So that's why whenever you see that word translated, it is salt. But wait, let's get back to this. What's an exilarch? Somebody tell me. In the Aramaic, the title is the Reish Galuta. What is the exilarch? Who is he eating with that the bread was so good that it didn't need any relish? He had such good bread at the house of the exilarch. Well, first of all, the word Reish Galuta is Aramaic, two Aramaic words. Reish means the head like Rosh, Reish, and the Galuta, right? The Galut is the exile, right? So the title exilarch has exile in it, right? An arch at the end of a word is usually, again, what does it mean? It means somebody who's the head of something, right? The archetype, archangel, right? You can think about where we use arch as a word. So the word exilarch, the translation is for this person, the Reish Galuta in Aramaic or exilarch in English from Latin. The exilarch was a guy, a person who was the head of the Jewish community in Babylonia. He was essentially the prince of the Jewish community. And the exilarch title, the people who were the exilarchs, lasted for hundreds of years. And we know that generations of the exilarchs. We have a genealogy of the exilarchs. Yeah. And we know these people who are in charge of it. It was a political leader. They were essentially the person that the king of Persia would meet with when they talked to the Jewish community. When they needed a Jewish representative, the exilarch was called into the king's office, not a priest. And as a matter of fact, according to tradition, who do you think the exilarchs were descended from? Anybody? They're not priests. Who do you think they're descended from? David, exactly. So I'll just show you a quick little summary of the exilarchs because they pop up in the Talmud. This might be the first time we've seen them mentioned. But this, I mean, in our reading of Berachot, we might not have seen them before. But you can see right here, the Jewish community in Mesopotamia during the Parthians, the Sasanians, and the Abbasid Caliphate, all the way up till the Mongol invasion in 1258, right? So the exilarch was regarded as an heir to the house of David and held a place of prominence with both rabbinical authority and as a noble within the Persian court. Now, how much the rabbis respected the exilarch oftentimes had to deal with how much the exilarch actually knew about Jewish tradition. There were definitely cases where the exilarch was not very well steeped in Jewish tradition. And again, you can see here, the word exilarch is a Greco-Roman. It's kind of a version of the word Rosh Hagolah, the head of the exile, or in Aramaic, the Reish Galuta. So in Hebrew, Rosh Hagolah. In Aramaic, Reish Galuta. Again, it shows you how similar Hebrew and Aramaic are. You can see the words and obviously in Aramaic, Ra'as al-Galut, which is very similar, right? So you can see there's no mention of the office before the 2nd century, but according to Jewish tradition, right, this book, the Seder Olam Zuta, alleges that the office of exilarch was established all the way back to the exile of Babylonia, to when the Jews first came to Babylonia. We don't know that for sure, but Jews believe that these descendants of King Jeconiah, King Jeconiah, who was exiled by the Babylonians, his descendants were the first exilarchs, which would conveniently make them literally connected to King David. Because King Jeconiah was King David's great-great-great-great-great-grandson, who were about 10 generations. That's about more like 15 generations, but going back all the way through King David. So that is the tradition. So we know, again, these ones are all based kind of somewhat on legends, but the rabbis describe this start here. And here's the names of them. And you can see some of them are known by names that are repeated, right? So there's a couple of different Kahanas, there's a couple of Zutras, and this continues again when the Arabs conquered Persia in the 700s, 650s to 700s again. The Arabs took over, and these names go all the way through. You can see all the way to here. Now you can see this is Karaite exilarchs. What? Yeah, the Karaite Jews who didn't follow the Talmud had their own list of who the exilarchs were. We don't know that that's based on any kind of factual relevance, but they believe that they had their own exilarch. We don't know that they really did, by the way. This is kind of mythological, if you will, to some extent. So, we don't know this stuff for sure, and there aren't many Karaites left anymore. So,
You said there's some up in San Francisco?
yeah, there are some, and again, a lot of the Karaites are kind of more modern people who kind of thought charism was an interesting, bless you, idea. And again, most of us would say it doesn't really make sense.
Celebrating Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur this weekend.
Mhm.
Because that's
In the Bible, in the Torah. they celebrate a little differently, but yeah. So the title of Exilarch is found occasionally, even in the Babylonian, even after it had ceased. Again, I think people like this idea that there was this kingship that continued on in Babylonia even after. Yeah. I don't want to say it's exactly like it, but it's a little like the Da Vinci Code kind of stuff that, Jesus has a line of people that are related to him, which of course would also be related to King David. But that whole concept that there's like an actual bloodline of that never went away. So this is the Exilarch, and the Exilarchs were, treated like royalty. It seems like, again, in Persia, by the rulers. So yeah, interesting, right? So this is the good bread that he had. Didn't even need salt. It didn't need any spices. It was so good. Which, by the way, also tells us, which, you shouldn't be surprised. People have different quality bread. They did then and they do now. Sometimes bread is of monstrous, quality, and then sometimes it's so delicious. I don't want to think about bread right now. But anyways, yeah, there's something simple, and we know it's simple, but it's one of the building blocks of almost everything we eat in every culture. There's some kind of bread. Not every culture, not so much in Asia, but in most Western and Middle Eastern cultures and African cultures. Yeah, I know. Who knows? I want to think about it. So, yep. Now we're going to talk about other parts of the body. This is a little weird tangent, which, what's the connection? Rava Bar Shmuel, because they're now going to tell us a little something that Rava Bar Shmuel said, which he says in the name of another rabbi, Rabbi Achia. And we're going to get a few of these things. And this is the first. We're going to get a few folk wisdoms for how we take care of ourselves, what we eat, and how we get rid of the things that we eat. So here's Rava Bar Shmuel. He said, urine only completely leaves the body if one urinates seated, as otherwise, due to the concern that drops of urine will drip onto clothes, he attempts to conclude prematurely. Rav Kahana said, over loose soil, which absorbs the urine, one is not concerned that it will splash on him. Therefore, even when standing, the urine leaves the body. And if there's no loose soil, there's another way to prevent the urine from splashing on his clothes while standing, and that is stand on an elevated place and urinate down an inclined plane. Now, if you're wondering, why is this in the Talmud? Because everything's in the Talmud. Everything that could possibly do with life and your body is in the Talmud, including this. Everything. And I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about everything that leaves your body, urine, blood, semen, poop, everything that leaves your body is found in the Talmud. Everything that goes into your body virtually is in the Talmud, including food, drink, drugs. Everything is mentioned at some point. Oh yeah, not a lot, by the way, but enough that we can generate some interesting traditions about that from the Talmud. Not a lot, by the way, but it is there. And so when we think about things that go in our body and then leave our bodies, here's some interesting observations about how you go to the bathroom. And what's really interesting about this is that he's not wrong. There's nothing in here where you'd say, well, that's stupid. But he's actually talking about, of course, for men. This is not something that women really have to worry about. But it definitely has to do with men. And it also, again, tells you that, hey, there's lessons on how to keep clean. These are not minor things in the sense that, nobody wants to pee on themselves. So if you don't want to, think about these different things, where you're going to the bathroom, how you're going to the bathroom. And these are all things to think about. So that is a little bit about peeing. That's it for peeing today. So don't think that we're now going to get into a long discussion about pee and different opinions about that. But there were a couple suggestions. Now we're going to get into some more about eating. And here are some more suggestions. So I think what happened is you had Rava, you have Rava's comment about this, and now you're going to have some other comments about your body. And it kind of goes back to the food. So here's some interesting ones. And again, some of you will say, why is this here? It's because it's, again, how do you live? How do you take care of yourself? And the Talmud has it. Now, yeah, if you don't think that this works, feel free to verbalize your disagreement with these things. But generally speaking, I think what you're going to read today makes sense. I don't think you're going to read anything here where you're going to go, this is stupid. So here we go. And you might look, Joyce gave us some really good words of advice about how to stay healthy. I think you're going to find that they're here in this we're about to read. You talked about clean water and clean air. You're going to see something specific about the fact you need a lot of water. Rava Bar Shmuel, same guy, said the following advice in the name of Rabbi Chia, which again, I think is the same rabbi that's used here. Yeah, same rabbi is quoting. After all eating, eat salt. And after all drinking, drink water, and you will not be harmed. That was also taught in a Baraita. After all eating, eat salt, and after all drinking, drink water, and you will not be harmed. It was taught in another Baraita. If one ate any food and did not eat salt afterward, or if he drank any liquid and did not drink water afterward, during the day he should be concerned about bad breath, and at night he should be concerned about diphtheria. Now, I will tell you the translation of the word askara here as diphtheria, I mean, that's pretty serious. I mean, diphtheria is not something you want to mess with. And again, I don't know that askara has to be diphtheria. I would say it could be another kind of virus, or it could be another type of ailment that, look, in the ancient world, I don't know that you always died of diphtheria. I'm not 100% sure. Let me just see if you always died of diphtheria, but it's a bacteria that you would get that it says the mortality rate approaches 10%. What's interesting about diphtheria is that you oftentimes see it in the mouth. And so I think that that's one of the things that people looked at with this, and why they translated it as diphtheria is because they see it in the mouth. And what's the connection? Because during the day it's bad breath, and at night it's diphtheria. So I think they thought it was some kind of mouth disease. So it is a bacteria. And here's the weird thing. Salt and water were probably cures for diphtheria. A salt water mix was probably a cure for diphtheria. Why? Because salt is an antibiotic. People put salt on a wound not because they wanted to hurt somebody, but because it healed them. It hurt like heck, but salt on a wound was a way to, I mean, Mary's a nurse, you know that, right? That was a way that people in the ancient world would help stop an infection. And they didn't know about bacteria, but it killed bacteria, the salt. So rubbing salt on a wound was not something that people did. Now we say it's like rubbing salt on a wound is like you're making it worse, right? In the ancient world, it wasn't done for that reason. It wasn't done because they wanted to hurt you. It was done because they wanted you not to have an infection. So, but again, nowadays we say it's hurting somebody. Salt was considered something you had to have with your food. Maybe again, because it was so common for people to have to freshen up their food, but maybe it also, people saw that it killed bacteria. That was oftentimes very common in foodborne. Yeah. It also is preservative, yeah. But from this standpoint, they seem to be concerned with what it's doing to your body. That bread, yeah, a lot of things are salted, right? But Mike's is right. Kosher meat is salted for that, partly for the reason of maybe making it healthier, but even though it's not healthy, obviously, but mainly to get rid of the blood. Salt is added to the kosher meat so that the blood that you're not supposed to have in the meat comes out. But yeah, it might have had another effect, which is getting rid of that, but which is also connected with the fact that the bloodier the meat, the more likely there's going to be bacteria. So if you don't get the blood out, that's why you're not supposed to, why it says all the time, you don't have raw meat, because it's an easy way for it to be contained in the blood, and then you don't cook it out. So it's a very interesting thing that they said that. They also talked about water, that you have to drink water. Now, what's interesting, of course, is that what are they talking about? Well, they're talking about drinking water with beer or with wine, with any of these other kinds of drinks. Now, if you think that I'm speculating on that, trust me, we're about to read it. But they also said right off the bat, if you're drinking food or drinking, you have water. If you're having food, have salt. So they think that these two things, water and salt, will help keep you healthy. They're definitely talking about dilution here, and you will see it in a moment. It's also something that probably would, to some extent, cause you, by having this water, to also evacuate food or toxins that were in the food. Is it 100% foolproof? No, but in the ancient world where they did not have antibiotics and where they didn't understand about some of these things exactly, these things probably help keep people alive. And we'll see it in a second. So they're very specific about it. So it seems as though, again, these are ways that people would protect themselves from foodborne illness, which is a perfect segue to tell you we're not doing Eat for TBA next week at CPK because it got a B rating. They're done. They're dead to me. So just so you know, what's the modern equivalent of this? I made a rabbinic decision. I don't make a lot of rabbinic decisions, especially none of these places are kosher, but that ain't kosher. You get a B rating in my book, and my wife does food safety for a living. And we look at this stuff and she knows, I mean, I'm stricter about it than she is, but I won't do that. Not only because I won't eat there, but I don't want to encourage anyone else to eat in a place where they have a higher chance of getting sick. And if you think that that's a joke, I mean, I'm joking about it, but you know that people got very sick at Madre around the corner. It had 10 people that got serious salmonella poisoning that were out for a month, some of these people.
Every time they got a rate, it was always days for, it was lamppost pizza. We never ate there, but they were proud of their A's.
Yeah.
They never got anything lower than an A, ever.
Well, you shouldn't, Mike. There's not a lot of restaurants, especially chain restaurants, that should be getting B's. If they do, the staff has to be fired.
Like, it's 1,000 bucks to go off, and but I talked to the owner, I knew the owner, so I've been going there forever when I used to work out there. And he says there's no way you should ever get a B. He has never gotten a B.
No.
You know, he trains his staff.
Not in America, not in the 20, not now. Not now. It's not like the old days where you could say maybe, you have to bribe somebody in order to get you never know which health inspector's coming anymore. Look, I'm not saying there isn't funny business that goes on, but it's very hard to pull because they don't send the same people for that reason. They rotate the people that do this. Honestly, people used to, I mean, especially you go to cities where graft and corruption were part of the makeup. I'm not picking on Chicago in particular, but let's say Chicago. Yeah, people used to pay off inspectors all the time, but you can't do that anymore.
That's wrong.
Yeah, violation. Yeah. Yeah. No, they know. And look, to me, food safety is one of the basic things that government should do. I mean, I'm not a big proponent for big government, but food safety is one of those things that they got to do. That's where people will take advantage of the situation if they can. I, everyone makes mistakes, Mike, but I will tell you this, the food safety is like, that's government 101. If they can't do that. So yeah, food safety is I would say, it's a Jewish, it's not, if it's not a Jewish obsession, it's very close. Israel does have, yeah, safety, food safety inspections. Uh, I will tell you that in my estimation, that's that. I mean, I haven't seen it, and I don't know for sure, and I've never like really got into it with people, but I'm not 100% sure that get you can't buy a certificate in in Israel to some extent. I hate to say that it's they haven't figured out how to, look, they have, yeah, it's not a, they've done better with government corruption, Israel has, over the last 20 years, but there used to be a lot of stuff like that. So, and there is in a lot of countries, but I was always a little bit less, I was always less trusting of those ratings, and I am in other countries. I remember I went when I was in China a couple of years ago. The last time I was there, actually, about 5 years ago, and I went to a restaurant, and I noticed after I was eating there, I can't read Chinese. I saw a rating, and it was the C rating there. And the guy who took me there, I'm like, you just took me to a restaurant with a C rating. So I don't know Chinese, but I can see that sign. And he goes, oh, those don't mean anything. I said, what do you mean? He says, because in China, all you have to do is pay somebody. He said, that guy just didn't pay somebody. And I was like, I don't know that I can argue with them. I mean, fortunately, this restaurant was a little tiny place, and you could actually see the kitchen. I mean, the kitchen was right there. But I said to them afterwards, I'm like, oh my gosh, I never really thought about that. If you live in a country where these things don't mean anything, and that goes for safety, building safety. I mean, they have buildings that collapse on children there because somebody got paid off. I mean, it happens all the time. Look, they had an outbreak about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. No, about 10 years ago. Uh, they had an outbreak in China of a terrible outbreak of um, children being killed by baby formula that was tainted.
It was 10 years.
It was about 4 or 5 years before COVID. I would say it's about 2016, 2015, something like that. And I don't even know if they ever reported how many kids got killed in China, babies, by this tainted formula. And just people didn't know. They had no idea what to do because they didn't trust the government. The government said there's no problem now. They were like, you said there was no problem before. How do we know?
They should know if a woman had a baby and it wasn't a man, a boy.
I know. Well, the government didn't care about that, right? But they don't. I don't know. It was 2008. So it was 16 years ago. So yeah, they said 300,000 children were identified. 54,000 were hospitalized. Uh, and yeah, it was just a complete meltdown. All I can tell you is that after that, um, every time we had people from China that would come and visit us, they'd come back they'd buy everything of formula they could find at Costco and bring it back. Their suitcases were filled with baby formula for their own kids and for their friends, and they probably sold some of it, but they couldn't sell. You couldn't buy formula in China if you were a parent. You just didn't trust it. I think that went on for 5 or 6 years, 7 years. I don't know. I mean, I think they finally got to a point where they trust it now, but they didn't trust it. I mean, the citizens had no faith that the government was telling them the truth. The government, they had no faith the government was telling them the truth during COVID either. I mean, that's why people in China had no idea what to do. And we don't know what they did during COVID because we don't trust them. I mean, we know that they didn't tell it. We know that we won't get the truth. But It's terrible. It's terrible in countries where people they don't know what's going on with our food. Especially when there's supposed to be a government that's protecting them. Look, I've told you, said this I said this a year ago, even when I talked about my trip to Ukraine in 1989. I went there right after Chernobyl to Ukraine, and people did not know whether their food and their stuff was contaminated by radiation, because the government wouldn't tell them what was contaminated. They wouldn't tell them what was contaminated. And you know what? They went out and bought their own Geiger counters. They bought their own Geiger counters, and they measured their own food. So especially things like milk that can get contaminated with radiation, they would scan every bottle of milk that they brought in. But they did everything. They did vegetables. And I was there. I mean, I was there a couple years, 2 years later, and they had everybody who could afford it or their next door neighbor had a Geiger counter. They would scan their food before they ate it. That's crazy. I mean, the government told them their food was good. They didn't believe them. And I don't blame them for not believing them, because they knew the government wouldn't tell them the truth. That's what people in some countries have to deal with. And I'm talking about our main rival countries, Russia and China.
It does not matter. Always be wary if someone says,
I hear you, but we don't live in a country where we believe that if the government has a certification on it, or you see a restaurant, our natural inclination isn't that's a lie. Not yet, at least. And then, by the way, I mean, you can argue it, and you can have your own belief, but I will tell you, my belief is, especially at a local government level, I trust it more. I trust it more. I trust the local government more. Only because those are the people who live in my community, and I would say that they're not going to do something in their own community that, if they're drinking the water, I got to think that if they're drinking the water, they know it's okay. And if I see them drinking only bottled water, then I would think maybe the water's not good. But my natural inclination as an American, especially living in California, is not to think that the government's lying to me. But it's possible, but I'm just saying, probably on a local level, it's less of an issue.
It's really interesting though. Think about when it's great.
Yeah.
Water clean, fresh.
True, but they did know, John, that you had to have fresh water that was not still, and they knew that if it was still water, that it was more likely to be unhealthy. Yeah. Did you ever hear that story about how Disneyland figured out how to get rid of mosquitoes? You ever heard that story? That Walt Disney was I forget where he was, in South America or something. He had seen that they had started this process where they would make the water. They had a machine that would make the water reverberate, right? It agitated the water. And the reason they did that is because the mosquitoes couldn't breed in agitated water. And so what they did when they built Disneyland is they put those water agitators, in all the water features, so that they wouldn't get mosquitoes.
And you know that where the submarines are?
Yeah.
That lake, or whatever you want to call it, is actually there in case of emergencies. It's actually water that would be used, and not use it. If they had to, if they had no more water, they could drink it.
In
that lake over there where the submarine ride is.
Oh, I didn't know that. At Disneyland. No, I didn't know that. But yeah, that water agitator thing, is a more modern idea, but we understood it in Judaism. We call it mayim chaim. If we don't see living things in the water, you don't drink it, right? It's a lake that has fish in it. It has geese in it, whatever. And it's okay. But if it's stagnant, fine. But if it's big enough, you filter out the water. Boil it. No, they didn't know. They didn't understand that. They didn't understand. They didn't understand you could boil away bacteria. They didn't know that. But here's what they did know, was that water was real important with your food. So the Gemara cites sages that taught in a Baraita, one who inundates his food with water, i.e., who drinks a great deal of water, will not come to suffer intestinal illness. The Gemara asks, how much water? Rav Chisda said, 1 jug per loaf. So they believe that you have to flood your food with water, that you had to have a lot of water with your food. That's a really interesting idea because we do know that if you keep hydrated, it not only helps all your organs, your blood, your skin, everything else, but that it helps in your digestion.
It's interesting that you watch a movie, they're always drinking wine.
Yeah, in the ancient world. Yeah.
Never drink- never-
So what do you see about what Judaism is saying? You got to drink water. It's never in here, you got to drink wine. It's not here. And as a matter of fact, you already read that if you're drinking wine, you have to flood that with water too. We're going to get it again, by the way. You're going to see that again. Rav Mari said, and Rabbi Yochanan said, one who's accustomed to eat lentils once in 30 days prevents diphtheria from afflicting his house. The Gemara comments, however, one should not eat lentils every day. What is the reason? Because it is deleterious in that it causes bad breath. So here you have a lentil, which can have one good feature, which is that it helps in preventing some diseases. This ascara, which again, maybe it's diphtheria, maybe it's some kind of bacteria that affects your mouth or some part of your body that maybe also somehow is connected to bad breath. But yeah, lentils are considered that kind of food. Why? Well, they probably did eat a lot of lentils, but you're not supposed to eat them every day. So you should have them at least once a month is what they're saying, but don't eat them every day. I don't know. I have never eaten that much lentils that has caused me bad breath that I know of. I don't eat, it's not my big food, lentils, but it was in the ancient world. Here's an interesting one. I like this one. And Rav Mari said that Rabbi Yochanan said, one who is accustomed to eat mustard once in 30 days prevents illnesses from afflicting his house. The Gemara comments, however, one should not eat mustard every day. What is the reason? Because it's deleterious. It is negative, right? The negative part is that it is hard on the heart. It causes a weakness of the heart. Now, I don't know about that. I've not heard anybody say that mustard can hurt your heart. Did not hear that. But they're saying mustard is one of those things that a little of it is really good for you.
You have no heart, how would you know?
Oh, I do have a heart. I was told I did.
So, so there is some people actually take mustard for heartburn, but other people say that heartburn is actually made worse by mustard. But I will tell you, I like mustard. I happen to be a fan of mustard. Not on everything, but I think like I had some today. It's a nice spice from the standpoint is it's not loaded with sugar like some other spices or relishes like maybe ketchup, which can have a lot of sugar in it. But yeah, mustard I've never heard has a negative effect on you, but I assume anything it can be not good. So mustard, probably people took it for some things, but the lethal dose, by the way, I'm just looking, the lethal dose of mustard for people is 200 milligrams. Wow, I didn't even know you could have, is that real? Mustard poisoning. Yeah, you could have, yeah, there is a lethal dose of mustard that you could get. It seems like definitely no, it'd be very hard to do that. Yeah, too much mustard. Is it too much mustard? Okay. Okay. Okay.
We had a little family picnic many, many years ago,
Yeah.
and my
You know,
cousin said,
people
"I'll bring
online
the
can't-
sandwich."
Yeah, you got to speak up. Mike's telling a mustard story. Yes.
Well, many years ago, we had a family party.
My cousin said, we'll bring the sandwiches. So they brought the sandwiches. There was mustard on them. I mean, a dot of mustard. All I needed to do was take the top off and it would have been fine.
Yeah.
But I got mad. And I left. My 40th birthday came around, had a party. Everybody bought me mustard.
They still remember it.
Oh, yeah. To this day, they still do. That's my mustard.
And you don't like mustard on anything?
Nothing.
Wow.
No.
So mustard. So when you ate a hot dog, what'd you put on the hot dog? Nothing? Just nothing. Ketchup, relish, nothing. Just a plain hot dog. Oh my God. Chili. Flavored. I like flavored mustard too. I like a little bit of both.
The Muslims or the Christians use the mustard.
I don't eat hot dogs.
As a what?
Signal, the back of rocks, so you can know where you're going.
Really?
That one. I think what?
In Kingdom of Heaven? I don't remember that part, but could be right. I do know that mustard seeds were planted by the Catholic friars that went up and down the state of California, Junipero Serra and those guys. They planted mustard seeds up and down as a way of marking the trail, the trail. Did you know that? So up and down the state of California, you'll see mustard still to this day because it was planted by the monks. Anyways, so yeah, mustard is got some good effects, but you got to be careful, not too much. Not too much. In Hebrew or in Aramaic, it's called hardal mustard. So again, overeat it. Another health recommendation, Rabbi Chia Bar Ashi said that Rob said, one who is accustomed to eat small fish will not come to suffer from intestinal illness. Moreover, eating small fish causes one's entire body to flourish, to grow, and to be healthy. Yes, and the word they use here is dagim katanim, little fish. They're talking about sardines, kippers. That is meat, yeah. There's no blessing for it, but it's saying that you eat it, it's good for your body. Sardines, kippers, herring, those kinds of things, right? Right? These are considered to be good things for your body, especially your stomach. Well, they say it also helps other stuff. It helps your body to grow. So they like that. Yes, they definitely seem to be encouraging this, at least, meat consumption. Interestingly, they don't talk about other kinds of meat, but they do talk about fish, little fish. And they said specifically little fish. They're not talking about big fish. They're not talking about like a fish you'd cut up and eat. They're talking about like a little fish that you'd swallow, eat up. A little sardine or kipper, little kipper. So for Yom Kippur, no, it's a little kipper. Kippers, the English love those things, those kippers. They love them. Now we're going to get into a really weird one, which is something we call, it's in Aramaic, it's called ketzach, but the translation for it is black cumin. And let's look at this. Rabbi Chama, son of Bar Chanina, said, one who is accustomed to eat black cumin, a medicine for the heart, will not come to suffer from heart pain. The Gemara raises an objection. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, black cumin is one of 60 deadly drugs, and therefore one who sleeps to the east of its storage area where its odor wafts with a westerly wind, responsibility for his blood is on his own head. So one rabbi said it's really good if you take it for your heart. But this other rabbi says, it's a deadly drug. And if you are breathing in just even the air of it, it's your fault. I'm warning you ahead of time. Don't do it. It's on your head if you do it. So the Gemara says, how could these both be true, right? But they say lo kasha. This isn't a problem, right? As Shimon ben Gamliel said that black cumin is harmful, that refers to its odor, whereas this rabbi, Chama, son of Bar Chanina, said, It is beneficial for the heart. That refers to its taste. And the Gemara relates, the mother of Rabbi Yirmiyah would bake him bread and would stick black cumin to it so its taste would be absorbed, and then would peel it off so that its odor would not harm him. So it's good to taste it, but not good to breathe it. Well, that seems crazy. That seems absolutely insane. However, one could say that if you're constantly breathing in the fumes of something, it would not be good for you. But if you had a little taste of it, it might be okay. So there are a lot of examples of this, but let's talk about what black cumin even is, because we don't use black cumin very much. It's used, and it's still used in the Middle East. And you might have seen black cumin before because it is used as a spice. And it's used especially, by the way, by people around Israel, especially the Muslims who live around Israel. So this is what it looks like. What we're talking about is probably, and I'll show you this one, is probably this. They're very, very different, these two things. One of them is caraway seeds. But that's probably not what they're talking about here. What they're talking about here is this Nigella sativa, which is also found still to this day in the Middle East, also India and Africa. And you can see that it's used by, here's what it looks like when it's part of a plant. And it is
Black? Is it in the same family as the brown?
is a what? No, I don't think it's similar to cumin. I don't think it's a cumin relation. I think the fact that we call it black cumin is more of the fact that it can have a similar taste, and it's used as a spice, like here, it's used as a spice. You can see here, it says people make something called kizha out of it, which is still used by Muslims in the area. And some consider the cities of Nablus and Jenin to be kizha. So this is still used by Arabs in the area. And I personally don't like the taste of it. It tastes bitter to me, I mean, personally. But yes, it's considered, as you can see, a Palestinian food in particular. But it's still very important in that area. And people usually put it into the tahina, or put it into a bread, or bake it onto the top of a bread to give it a certain taste that, to me, here it says it's a sharp, bitter taste. I don't really taste sweetness to it. Bless you. Yeah, to me, it's just bitter. But people like it, and I mean, some people like it, and so kizha is still used by people, and it's considered safe. There's no issue having it, but you can see that that people were still using it as a medicine in the Middle Ages. So you can still see, again, the Ibn Sina, Avicenna, as he's called in the Christian translation or transliteration of his name, but he was considered he's the Muslim equivalent of Maimonides, as a doctor and also philosopher, Avicenna or Ibn Sina. He was well respected by Christians and Jews, just like Maimonides was by Christians and Arabs and Muslims. They considered it also having health benefits. So you can see that the oils in it, sativa, the Nigella sativa oil, has all of these kinds of acids in it. And what does it say right here? Wow. It has a short-term benefit on lowering systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Hello? A 2016 review indicated that it might be used to lower cholesterol, LDL, and triglyceride levels. Hello? People, that's what this thing just said. Right? What does it say right here? So turns out that's exactly what it does. It's exactly what it does. Rabbi Chama and Bar Hanina, Rabbi Chama Bar Hanina, we're talking about 1600 years ago, 400 CE. So you're talking about, it's right here, documented right here. What's interesting is that for Jews who lived in, let's say, Poland or Ukraine or Russia 200 years ago, you weren't getting black cumin, right? You weren't getting it. You were getting potatoes and borscht, which was clogging your arteries with fat. You didn't have this. So yeah, we were missing this. They would talk about these things and the rabbis would be talking about these and be like, I don't know where you're going to get this. Nowadays, we can get it anywhere. You can go down to the store and buy kizha. I don't know if you can get it at Ralph's, but you could get it at Valley Produce. So yeah, and people still, even to this day, put it in bread. I can't say I enjoy the taste of it, but if it had a medical use, definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's Sprouts.
Maybe. So that's black cumin, which again is not caraway. So it says that some people refer to it as black, but it's not what they're talking about in the Bible. We know that in the Talmud, because it was written in the Middle East. All right. So that's a little bit about another little thing for your health. Now we're going to kind of move away a little bit from that to stuff about blessings and foods. Yeah, and we're going to get to it, but that was a little discussion again about health benefits of food. So let's look at some blessings, and we're going to get to a very interesting discussion by the end about the really important question. What tree was in the Garden of Eden? We'll get to that. We learned in the Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda says that one who recites over herbs and leafy greens, who creates kinds of herbs? Rabbi Zera said, and some say Rabbi Hanana Bar Papa said, the halakha is not in accordance with the tradition of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Zera said, and some say Rabbi Hanana Bar Papa said, what is the reason for Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? The verse says, blessed is the Lord day by day. And that, of course, is from Psalms that we were reading. The question arises, is it so that one blesses him by day and does not bless him by night? Rather, the verse comes to tell you, each and every day, give the Lord the appropriate blessings for that day. Here too, with regard to the blessings recited over food, for each and every type of food, give the Lord the appropriate blessing for that food. So here they have a proof text, which the rabbis on one hand say, does it teach us this? Does it teach us that? Well, no. What it really teaches us is that we're supposed to say the right blessing over the right food, over that food. Right? You eat a food, you say the right blessing over it. We don't just say any blessing over the food and just say, well, that's good enough. So saying the blessing matches the food. You eat that food, you say that, right? You eat that food, I'm going to say that blessing. So they're very important. It's very important to them that they match it up, and they seem to sometimes be obsessed with it. And so I'm not going to,
Is there a blessing for every food?
no, but there's blessings for certain foods, right? And so here it is right here, this blessing over eating stuff that grows out of the ground. And then we're going to get to this. So there's discussions about whether you said the wrong blessing over the food, and they're concerned with that. They're concerned with this. And so this is the kind of stuff where you start to get a little upset, where people are like, but you're blessing the food. What do you care that the food was the wrong food, that, wasn't exactly the right blessing? So again, they get into these discussions about it, and they want people to say the right blessing for the right thing, because essentially, whether it's food or anything else, we want to say the right thing to God. We don't want to minimize the fact that there are blessings for these things. And so we say the right thing at the right place, at the right time, for the right thing. And they do seem to be obsessed with this. So let's get into this right now. Rabbi Zera said, and some say Rabbi Hanana Bar Papa said, I keep wanting to say Hanina, it's Hanana, said, come and see the attribute of flesh and blood is unlike the attribute of the Holy One, blessed be he. The attribute of flesh and blood is that an empty vessel holds that which is placed within it, while a full vessel does not hold it. The attribute of the Holy One, blessed be he, however, is not so. As if God adds to a person who is a full vessel in terms of knowledge or good attributes, he will hold it. A person who is an empty vessel will not hold it. That is alluded to the verse, by the verse which says, and he said, if you will surely listen, which is Shamoa Tishma, which is what happens to us at Mount Sinai, to the voice of the Lord your God, and you do what is right in his eyes, right? This verse is interpreted homiletically. If you listen in the present, you will listen in the future as well. And if you will not listen, alternatively, you will not, if you did not listen to the old, you review what you have already learned, then you will listen to the new as well. But if you turn your heart away, you will no longer be able to hear. And so the rabbis say, look, human beings, interestingly, have an amazing propensity to learn if they're willing to learn. If they're not willing to learn, it doesn't matter. They won't learn. So you say, well, that person doesn't know anything, so I'm going to teach them because they don't know anything. And the lesson from that, I hate to say it, is that a lot of those times, they're not going to learn anything. The reason that they don't know anything in the first place, the reason they don't learn anything in the first place, is because they don't want to learn. They're not able to learn. And so it doesn't matter that they don't know stuff. The weird thing is that somebody who knows a lot, who understands a lot, they can continue to absorb things because they have a propensity to want to continue to learn and grow. And so people who listen will continue to listen. People who don't listen, they'll never listen. uh, so, but what's interesting again is that God gives us these blessings to continue to learn, right? So just because you know a lot of stuff, that doesn't mean that you're not going to continue to learn stuff. Actually, it means quite the opposite. You will continue to learn stuff. The best example of that is sitting in front of me right now, which is Joyce, who knows a lot of stuff and is still learning. And so that's the interesting thing, is that there's every example that I've ever seen in life of this is true, which is that, yeah, what you used to do, you'll continue to do. It's kind of a sad thing in a way, obviously, if you look at it from the bad side, but it's a lesson. Maybe, again, you try to do better. But yeah, on the good side is you'll never stop learning. Yeah. So,
Never stop learning?
Never.
she never stops learning. So the next part is a new Mishnah. That's right. The next one is a new Mishnah, which is a new section the Mishnah teaches, which gets back to this issue I said we're going to talk about, which is more general blessing, exempt one from the obligation to recite a more specific one. So let's get into some specific examples of that. One who recited, who creates the fruit of the ground over the fruit of the tree, fulfilled his obligation. One who recited, creates the fruit of the tree over the fruits of the earth, did not fulfill his obligation. And over all food items, one who recited, by whose word all things come to be fulfilled his obligation. So what does that mean? If you said a blessing over a food that came from a tree, but you said Bori Priya Adama, that tree's in the ground. And so technically you're not wrong. If you say Bori Priya Eitz over a fruit of the tree, over something that was in the ground, you didn't fulfill your obligation because maybe that thing was never, well, it wasn't on a tree. So I'll give you a silly example of it because there's a very interesting example of it. Most of us would say an avocado is a vegetable. I don't think it's a vegetable. I always serve it on a salad, right? We said, but it's not, it's a fruit, right? Right. Everybody knows it grows on a tree. Well, you know that in California. If you don't live in California, you may not know that. You think it's a vegetable maybe because it's served with that kind of stuff. But the reality is if you said over that, you said Bore Priya Adama, you'd be covered because it did come out of the ground. But on the other hand, if you said over a potato, Bore Priya Eitz over a tree, you didn't say the right blessing. You gotta go back and you gotta say the right blessing. You gotta say Bore Priya Adama. But then they get to this last thing, which is this blessing that we say, Shachkol Nihyeh Bidvaro. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shachkol nihyeh bidvaro. Everything is created, right, through your word. God, everything is created with your word. Now, if you say that, that's the most general blessing you can say. That's the blessing, by the way, you say over meat. That's the blessing you say over well, I'm trying to think of something that's not bread or vegetables, but that's what you say over, technically speaking. Exactly. I was just gonna say, technically, if you're having a vodka or you're having a whiskey, that's what you say. Yes.
Because usually on Shabbat, I drink a glass of mead, which is honey wine.
Yep.
So I was like, wait, honey doesn't come from wines. So I was like, what do I say?
So who told you that?
I asked around, I just sort of looked and I looked online as well, because then I started talking to people as I thought, I didn't even know if meat was kosher technically.
Yeah, it is. It's just honey.
It said to me that honey wasn't kosher.
Who said that?
Just some guy that I was, a Jewish guy that I was talking to. That
No.
a lot of them, I was like, sure, because I thought about that 2 hours later. I thought,
What do you use it? You use it. Yeah, you use it. You eat it on Rosh Hashanah. Yeah.
So meat's not kosher for Pesach.
Yes. Yes, because it goes through a fermentation process with yeast. But yeah, meat is definitely something that goes under the Shachol Nihyeh Bidvaro, but technically speaking, so is whiskey. But you could say, well, whiskey is a hamotzi lechem min haaretz because it comes from wheat, but may not come from wheat. Whiskey or some other drinks come from rye. They could come from corn. Though that would also be a hamotzi prayer. But yeah, almost everything is grain alcohol. I'm trying to think of what's not. Well, vodka, which could come from potato, that would be a shakol nihyeh bidvaro. But a lot of things that are not vegetables, that are well, I don't want to go through all the things we eat today that come from who knows where, because it's been processed. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I'll just give you an example. I mean, technically speaking, yeah, if you had some soy products where you didn't know where it came from, like I do, you could definitely say the shakol nihyeh bidvaro. Now, a lot of soy stuff is from a soybean, and you'd say Bore Priya Adama over it. But yeah, if you're eating a big, what's it called? If you're eating like a Beyond Burger, you're not thinking to yourself, hey, that's a bean I'm eating. You think I'm eating something that juicy marbles, right? I'm going to say a shakol nihyeh bidvaro. I'm going to say that blessing by whose word all things come to be fulfilled. So by the way, they used to say, I don't know that this was a true thing, but supposedly at rabbinical school, I don't know that this ever happened, by the way. It's a legend that, they would pour water for somebody, in the interview and see if they said a blessing over it. The blessing that they could say is Shakol Nihyeh Bidvaro. I mean, do you have to say it over water? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it's not considered a food, so it's not even, but some people, and they would do it as a test to see if somebody would say a blessing. Would they say the Shakol Nihyeh? Now, I don't know that it ever happened. I've never seen it. I heard people talk about it, but I don't know that was ever done. But supposedly, again, that was a a test to see whether people would say it. But that's the most general blessing you could possibly say because it covers everything. Everything was made through God's word. So, the Gemara begins by ascertaining who is the Tana that holds the primary factor in the growth of a tree is the earth, and therefore one may recite who creates fruit of the ground over fruits of the tree to fulfill his obligation. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, that is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as we have learned in a Mishnah dealing with the halachot of the first fruits. If after one picked the first fruits from his field, the spring dried up, and the tree upon which the fruit grew was chopped down, he brings the fruit to the temple, but does not read the accompanying praise. The tree or the spring, which were the primary components of the growth of fruit, no longer exist. And he cannot recite the passage thanking God for the good land, which is part of the blessing that we say when we bring our food for the Bikurim. When we do it in Kitavo, it says you bring your fruit to the God of the earth to God and thank God for the fruit of the good land. But how can you do that if there's no more water there and there's no tree there? Can you really say that it's still a good land? Rabbi Yehuda says he brings the first fruits and reads the accompanying praise, as the land is the primary factor for the growth of the tree, and the tree itself is merely an extension of the land. Even after the tree is felled, the land remains intact. Similarly, with regards to the blessings, the halakha maintains that the fruit of the tree is considered to be the fruit of the ground as well. So, you do say the blessing because the blessing over the land is the land. It's not whether there's a tree on it or whether there's a spring on it, but whether the land is there, and the land's not going anywhere. Well, I guess you could say, I guess it could get washed away, but there's going to be land. So you can always say the blessing over Adamah, over the ground. So that's covered. That's why it covers it. That's the basis for it, a basis for it. We learned in the Mishnah, one who recited who creates fruit of the tree over fruits of the earth did not fulfill his obligation. The Gemara asks, that is obvious, as the fruit of the earth do not fall under the rubric of trees. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said the ruling in the Mishnah is only necessary according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who said in another context that wheat is a type of tree. Wheat is a type of tree. How's that a tree? How's wheat a tree? Well, you'll see. They're going to explain why. So here we go. The tree from which Adam, the first man, ate, Rabbi Meir says, it was a vine. As nothing brings wailing and trouble upon man, even today, other than wine, as it is stated with regard to Noah, and he drank from the wine and became drunk. Rabbi Nehemiah says it was a fig tree. As with the object with which they were corrupted in sin, they were rehabilitated. As is stated, they sewed together fig leaves and made for themselves loincloths. They must have taken the leaves from the tree closest at hand, the tree of knowledge. Rabbi Yehuda says it was wheat, as even today, the child does not know how to call his father and mother until he tastes the taste of grain. So what are we talking about here? So we're talking about why grain is so important and why it would be considered a tree. And they connect it back to the tree that's in the Garden of Eden, that Rabbi Yehuda is connecting it to the tree and the tree of knowledge was. Why? Well, the kicker, the end part, which is that until a kid can eat grain, he's not really smart enough to know anything. He doesn't know how to call his father and mother, right? He doesn't know how to speak until he's able to eat grain. Now, you might say that that's strange because, like, why is that? Why is that even a thing? First of all, it tells us that they didn't necessarily give grain to little babies. That wheat was not a big part of their diet for little kids, which I think is interesting because
I would say, I mean, we really start that lemons out with.
Yeah.
Fruit and vegetables.
yeah, and so
Cereal until they're.
so doctors to this day will tell you not to give wheat to babies when they're little, to start them out on the vegetables and the fruits and all those kinds of things before you start them on wheat. So that's still, at least as of when I had kids, that was still the common logic. I will tell you that this is again, this is the American Association of Pediatrics. I mean, I don't know. This isn't some cockamamie website, some weird parent started their own blog on what they should do. Wheat is the grain most often associated with food allergies because wheat contains a gluten. Parents may have concerns about when to introduce it and what effect it will have on their child. In general, children are developmentally ready to begin eating solid foods between 4 and 6 months old. For most babies, it does not matter what the first solid foods are. Single grain infant cereals, rice and oats are traditionally introduced first. Once your baby learns to eat a few first foods, you can gradually give them other foods. Here it says right here, there is no evidence that waiting to introduce or limiting allergy-causing foods such as wheat or other gluten containing rye or barley beyond 4 to 6 months of age prevents any food allergy or the onset of celiac disease, which celiac disease, as you know, is what most people who have gluten allergies, well, at least originally fell under celiac disease. Wheat can be introduced most commonly in the form of infant cereal as well as wheat or multigrain cereal. So it's not, though, usually introduced right away, even to this day. But they're basically saying you don't have to worry about it. Why are they saying that, folks? Because there are a lot of people who still won't do it. They won't introduce wheat into their baby's diets until, a year in some cases. Now,
Causes or not causes, but has a good correlation to gluten allergies,
is what?
delaying introducing wheat.
Yeah, there's
Usually allergy caused by the immune system.
Yes.
Not having a good response.
This is the question of whether peanut allergies have been raised by this.
Who have pet allergies or people who've never had a pet in their house. They're not used to pet dander.
There's definitely discussion about that, but look at this. The AAP, the American Association of Pediatrics, recommends that breastfeeding as the sole source of nutrition for your baby for about 6 months. So, that's still in the 2025 year that we're almost into right now. That's still the guidance on this. But yes, as Jesse just raised, there are people who think that with the increase of food allergies has started because people have delayed giving their children certain kinds of foods.
Other doctors are also relating it to vaccines
I know.
because the
I know.
kids that didn't have vaccines in their childhood, there were no peanut allergies. Everybody had peanut butter and jelly.
I know, but I had a lot of vaccines when I was a kid, and I can eat peanuts. I don't know. Again, it could be different new vaccines. It could be new stuff. We don't know. But I will tell you that it's interesting here that there is this understanding that you do not, what? I know. I just got my daughter just texted me. Understand that there was this they knew that kids didn't have it until they started around this age. So they started saying mama and papa. I don't know. How old are people when they start doing that? I don't even know. How old are kids when they mama? I don't know. Probably about 6 months, no? Right? Is it later than that? I don't even remember. Yeah, yours said dad. They called me John. Called me sir. But it tells you that it is, even then was later, wasn't right away. But that's not, of course, the bigger issue. What was in the Garden of Eden, folks? Was it wheat, really? Because that was the tree of knowledge for them, because they were like little babies. And so that was wheat they must have had. That's an interesting way of getting to the wheat. But let's look at the other two, right? The other two are that it's a grape or that it's a fig. Those are the other possibilities. By the way, notice what it wasn't, an apple. Did you notice that that's not even possible? It's not even in the discussion. Why? Because they didn't have apples in that area. The apples were introduced, started off in China and moved west and went through Persia. Yeah, moved to Persia, and it was in the Persian period, which was well after, we know the biblical period. The Persian period is towards the end. So they didn't have it. They had it, by the way, in the Talmud. They knew what an apple was. They were living in Persia, and Persians loved apples. So they had apple trees. They knew it wasn't that, because they knew that weren't native species to Israel. But figs are. Figs are. Figs are a possibility, because what did they do? They put figs over their bodies, right? That was that famous scene. They used fig leaves. That's what the Bible says. It says specifically that they sewed together fig leaves. And it made sense, the rabbi said. They just ate of the tree of knowledge, right? That's the fruit. That was the fruit of the tree of knowledge, right? Because they were eating off the tree of the fruit of life. We don't know what that fruit was, by the way. It doesn't say that here. Well, it doesn't say it here. But the tree there that was the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a fig tree, because that's what they had. That's what they sowed. So they said, by inference, that's what they used for the covering for their first clothes. So that was what the tree was. Okay, that makes sense. That's a tree that grows in that area. But the really wild one was that it was a grapevine, that it was a grape tree. That was grapes. I mean, it's a vine. The fruit. And the reason that they say that is because we know that when they ate from it, their life became hell. Right? They get thrown out of the Garden of Eden for it. And what gets you into more trouble than wine? And just look at Noah. Just look at the next big story in the Bible, right after the story of creation in the garden, chapter 5 and 6. That's chapter 2. Chapter 5 is Noah. And we can see right away that wine gets Noah into trouble. And it doesn't get into trouble in the ark, it's when he gets out of the ark and plants the vine that he gets drunk, and his son rapes him, molests him, uncovers his nakedness, whatever he does to him. Bad news. But it's because he was drunk. So wine gets us into trouble, and wine got Adam and Eve into trouble. So that's what they assume could also be was the fruit. What's interesting, of course, is that the wine becomes associated with the fact that they are eventually he becomes incoherent. So the food that's the fruit of the tree of knowledge ends up being the fruit that causes people to lose their knowledge and their control. So there's an irony in that as well, right? That's what he ate. So there you have it, folks. You have an interesting little text there about what was in the garden. Again, it went off of this question of food. What's the food that we have here? We'll read a little bit more. Based on this, it might have entered your mind to say, since Rabbi Yehuda said that wheat is a type of tree, that one should recite over it Borei Pri Ha'etz, for the fruit of the tree. Therefore, the Mishnah taught us that with regard to blessings, the principle is different. Where does one recite who creates the fruit of the tree? Only in the case where you take the fruit, the branch remains, and again produces fruit. And so the only tree, the only time that you say the fruit of the tree is off of a tree that can continue to have fruit off of it. Once you take the wheat off the stalk, it doesn't grow back. It's not a tree. You don't which also, of course, opens it up to all the other fruit, all the other things that you get, where you only get the fruit once, and then the thing's dead. That's not a tree. That's not considered a tree. It has to be a tree, like an orange tree or an apple tree or any of those kind of avocado tree, where the tree is there and you can keep coming back year after year to get fruit off. That's the only thing you say Borei Pri Ha'etz over. Anything else, it's not it. And to some extent, that opens it up for why a grape, why we say Borei Pri Hagafen, why we say the blessing over a vine and not over a tree. Because you could say, well, isn't a grape like come off of a tree? No, because it comes off of a vine. And once you pick that vine, you may never get grapes again. I mean, it can. The vine doesn't necessarily die, but it also isn't there to pick every year. Everybody knows that. You cut back the vine, that branch, it's more than a branch. It's the whole vine.
But it's saying a tree.
Yeah.
So what trees produce fruit once?
Almost no trees. That's what I'm saying. But if there was a tree, if there was something that sprouted out and you just get that one thing off of it, then, well, here's the problem. Look, most of us, trying to think, there's, well, I'll give you an example. This is kind of a weird example, but it's one that you know, and you know this fruit, so I'm not gonna, but cranberries. And normally you'd say, oh, cranberry's a fruit, right? I'd say it's a fruit, but it's not in the sense of it doesn't come from a tree. So you wouldn't say Borei Pri Ha'etz over cranberry. Because it doesn't have a tree, a stalk, a branch where it grows and you eat it all the time.
Comes off a tree.
I know, but it's a fruit. Wouldn't you say cranberry's a fruit?
It has a pit. So like avocado is fruit.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to have a pit. A fruit doesn't have to have a pit.
Tomato.
Yeah. Yeah. But tomatoes, well, that's a perfect example. Tomato comes off of a vine, doesn't it? So yeah, I want to give you that one because like people get freaked out by tomatoes as a fruit. It is, but but that's not the point. The point is that we talk about fruits that would be, I think a lot of berries come like that too. I mean, like you don't pick, well, that's not true. I mean, most people don't pick blueberries off of a tree, right? I mean, you think of it because some people like tie it up, same way they tie up vines. I mean, technically a vine is on the ground and you don't have to have a vine on a holder. But even in those days, even in the ancient world, they knew you have to elevate the vine and it grows better when it's on a piece of wood and tied up. They tied it up. They knew. You never see how they got cranberries? Yeah, it's crazy. You got to go back east. Yeah. Yeah, the ocean spray. Here. No, it's really cool. The cultivation of I mean, like everybody else, I probably am drinking it with a whole lot of sugar. But yeah, this is the way they because it's big in Massachusetts, it's big in those areas. So technically speaking, this is the way, I'll just show it to you. So they basically, it creates you have a bog. And so this is what it looks like. Well, that's what they look like there, but yeah, if you've ever seen a cranberry bog, it looks like why is there not a good picture of a cranberry bog? Well, here's one. So let's see. So that's the bog right here. So
You have a blocking cranberry.
yeah, so it's a fruit. It's a fruit. I mean, everyone knows it's a fruit, but we would definitely, and it's right there, fruit clusters. But and the same thing with blueberries and with like raspberries and stuff. We wouldn't think of those as trees, But we would think of them as Borei Pri Eitz. Like my natural inclination would be to say Borei Pri Ha'etz over it. But the Talmud basically just said that if it's a fruit that you can't go back and pick the fruit from, you don't say it. Say where you take the fruit and the branch remains and again produces fruit. However, in a situation where you take the fruit, the branch does not remain and again produce fruit, we do not recite the blessing who creates fruit of the tree, but rather who creates fruit of the ground. So technically speaking, you'd be looking at a cranberry and you'd say, well, maybe I say fruit of the ground, Borei Pri Adamah. And we learned in the Mishnah on all food items, if he recited, by whose word all things come to be, he fulfilled his obligation. It was stated that the Amoraim disputed the precise explanation of the Mishnah. Rav Huna said, the halacha applies to all foods except for bread and wine, since they have special blessings. One who does not fulfill his obligation by reciting the general blessing, by whose word all things come to be, and Rabbi Yochanan said, one fulfills his obligation with the blessing, by whose word all things come to be, even over bread and wine. And so when they come down to it, is there's even a dispute over whether you can just say the general blessing over everything. And one rabbi says you can, except for bread and wine, because there you obviously have hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and then you have borei pri hagafen. But Rabbi Yochanan said, as long as you say a blessing, everything comes into be. You could say it even over bread and wine. Now, basically, they're saying, look, everybody knows with bread and wine the proper blessing. But they're also saying, again, should you say the right blessing over the right food? And one says, that is the way we do it. Some say you just can't do it.
Got the blessing over the dirt or the tree, but you know the one from Genera. You can still do that.
Yeah.
Get away.
I would say what's interesting about fruits in general is that a lot of it has to do with look, if we don't know where the food comes from, you're basically always covered by saying the general blessing. But what it's saying is that, again, depending on whether your food comes from a tree or comes out of the earth, we understand that. Look, I mean, technically speaking, cranberries, berries, any kind of those kind of things, they could be grown on the ground. I mean, you can grow, you could put them up high, or you can put them in the water, or you can put them on the earth. But it's how you cultivate it. Because you don't have to grow cranberries in a bog. We just generally do that because they come out better and we've used that as a cultivate, but you don't have to. Cranberries can be left to their own devices and would be a bush. So it's a very interesting kind of like weird discussion on like, where is the food coming from? And then saying the appropriate blessing because it comes from that place.
Let's go 10 years in the future when they're starting to cultivate fruit in the laboratories.
Yeah, I guess the answer would be that we're going to be left with a situation at some point where we might have to always say Shakol Bidvaro, which is everything was created. But there is a recognition. I mean, kind of like cutting through all this. There's a recognition that we're supposed to thank God for the blessings for the foods that come out of where they come out of, right?
Sure.
And so we say to God, God, we thank you for the land. We thank you for this tree. We thank you for the earth. All of these things are miracles and blessings for us. And so, we recognize that. Again, there's people who they want to make sure 100% that they're saying the right thing. That becomes a big deal for them. But, and they argue over. I mean, the cranberry issue, I mean, people have differences of opinion on that. Not everybody says Borei Pri Adamah is the proper blessing. Some people say, yeah, but a cranberry would grow as a bush if you didn't put it in a bog, and you should do it by the way it would naturally come about. But does that logic really make sense? Because grapes wouldn't necessarily be on a vine if you, I mean, I guess they're always on a vine, but I mean, we treat them differently. But again, when it comes to bread and when it comes to wine, the blessings are pretty straightforward. We know what they are. Borei, Borei Pri Hagafen and Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. So we're left with that. Let's read a little bit more and we'll finish up with this today. The Gemara asks, the remarks, let us say that this dispute is parallel to a Tanaitic dispute, which means it's from the Mishnah period, the early period. Dispute found elsewhere as it was taught in a Tosefta, which is one of these collections of Mishnaic texts that didn't make the Mishnah. One who saw bread and said, how pleasant is this bread? Blessed is the omnipresent who created it, fulfilled his obligation to recite a blessing. So he didn't say Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. He said, Baruch Adonai, she Borei, and just said Borei. Didn't even say Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, just said Borei. He said, he fulfilled his obligation. One who saw a fig and said, how pleasant is this fig? Blessed is the Holy One, blessed is Berachot Adonai, who created it. That's not a blessing. It's not even Shakol Nihe Bidvaro. He didn't even say that. He just said blessing. So someone who sees a fig and does that, or sees the fig and says that, fulfilled it. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir, who again, very famous rabbi of that period, lived around 150 Common Era, right? Rabbi Yossi says, one who deviates from the formula coined by the sages and blessings did not fulfill his obligation. If so, let us say Rav Huna, who said that one who recites by whose word all things come to be over bread or wine, does not fulfill his obligation in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Yochanan, who said that one who recites by whose word all things come to be over bread or wine fulfills his obligation, holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And so they say that there are differences of opinion on, again, whether you have to say the exact blessing the way that the rabbis gave it. And so there's a difference of opinion on that. Obviously, there's different schools that hold on that. And we'll just say the Gemara rejects this. Rav Huna could have said to you, I said my statement even in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, as Rabbi Meir only stated his opinion that one who alters the formula of the blessing fulfills his obligation. There, where the individual explicitly mentions the term bread in his blessing, but where he does not mention the term bread, even Rabbi Meir agrees that he did not fulfill his obligation. And so, what's the problem? If you call out what you're saying a prayer over, again, maybe the opinions in the school of Rabbi Meir is, the thought of Rabbi Meir is at least you've called out the right thing. At least you've recognized the right thing. Even though you didn't say the formula right, you recognize the food. And Rabbi Yochanan could have said to you, I said in my statement, even in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, as Rabbi Yossi only stated in his opinion that one who alters the formula of the blessing does not fulfill his obligation, there because he recited a blessing that was not instituted by the sages. However, if he recited by whose word all things come to be, which was instituted by the sages, even Rabbi Yossi agrees that after the fact, he fulfilled his obligation to recite a blessing. And so, what do we learn? We learn that, yes, there's differences of opinion, but everyone should agree on certain things. If you say the blessing, all things are created, you're saying a traditional blessing, and it's completely okay to say it over the wrong thing. You didn't say the right food, you weren't sure what to say, and you said that blessing, you're covered. The sages accept that.
Rabbi, you have two people sitting there ready to have a meal. And one just goes through the motions of saying the proper blessing, and one doesn't know the blessing, but is really meaningful.
We're going to get, let me read one paragraph and we're going to get to that. You're absolutely right. It's specific, actually. Regarding blessings that do not conform to the formula instituted by the sages, the Gemara relates that Binyamin the shepherd ate bread, and afterward recited in Aramaic. How do we know it's Aramaic? Because that's not in the quotes. Because it has the words, Barich Mare Dahaya Pita. He said the word pita, which is an Aramaic word. He said barich instead of baruch. I mean, I read it to you because you can hear the little difference, right? Pita, pita, it's Aramaic. That's the Aramaic word for bread, right? He didn't say lechem, he said pita. So, Rav said he fulfilled his obligation to recite a blessing. The Gemara objects, but didn't Rav himself say any blessing that does not mention God's name, it's not a blessing? The Gemara amends the formula of his blessings. He said, blessed is the all-merciful master of this bread. So he didn't say the words Adonai, he said master. And he said Rahmana, the merciful, which is another name for God, the all-merciful. So he did say it. The Gemara asks, but don't we require 3 blessings and grace after meals? How did he fulfill his obligation with 1 sentence? The Gemara explains fulfills his obligation that Rav also said. He fulfills the obligation of the first of the 3 blessings, but he must recite 2 more blessings to fulfill his obligation completely. He did part of the blessings, he didn't do all of them. But here's the part we're going to finish with, which is exactly what Mike was getting to. The Gemara asks, what is he teaching us? The Gemara answers, although he recited the blessing in a secular language other than Hebrew, he fulfilled his obligation. So, Mike, what did you just say again? So say out, because I want to repeat it for people to
Say, is if you have someone that just says the blessing, not really caring what he's saying. And you have someone that maybe doesn't know the blessing, says it in Aramaic or what have you, but is really meaningful.
or in English.
That's right. And
From the heart.
but really meaningful of the blessing that is really thanking God for the food that you're gonna be eating. I think that's more important than just going through the motions.
Yeah. And what the rabbis just said is that it's meaningful even if the language isn't in Hebrew. So they said this a long time ago, and they said it about a language that we don't speak either anymore, except for the few blessings that we have in Aramaic. But he just said that if you say it in English, it's still meaningful. It's still important. He said, Lishon Hol, which is a blessing that is a common secular language. It's a non-holy language. A hol is the word we use for secular or not holy. Kodesh, right, is holy. So Hebrew in our language, we didn't call it Hebrew, by the way. We didn't call Hebrew Hebrew. He didn't say that, right? He didn't say that. We didn't call it Hebrew. Loshen Kodesh, the holy tongue, the holy word. You've heard that word, right? Loshen Kodesh. Because people in Yiddish used to differentiate between Yiddish, which literally means Jewish, right? He speaks Jewish, but it's not Jewish from the standpoint of holy tongue. They said Loshen Kodesh, it means that they said it in Hebrew. If people say Loshen Kodesh, they were saying in the holy tongue, which was Hebrew, which could also in some cases be Aramaic, but Loshen Kodesh was specifically really, obviously they're talking about Hebrew. So if somebody said, I speak, did he say it in Loshen Kodesh? Yeah, he said it in Hebrew. So that was how they differentiated it, which was funny because they called their other language, they called it Yiddish, which is Jewish, but we knew what the holy tongue was, Loshen Kodesh. So that's the lesson from us, which we take away. And again, it's something important to think about as we go into Yom Kippur. We talk about all the prayers that we say at Yom Kippur. Some of them we say in Hebrew, some of them we say in Aramaic, like Kol Nidre, right? Right. We say it in Aramaic, but of course, the languages are secondary to what our intent is, right? Is if we say it, and that's what the Gemara says here, is that what is it teaching us? That's the important thing, is that we say it from our heart. So it's pretty interesting that that stood us for a long, long time. Whatever country we lived in, whatever land we lived in, that we spoke Hebrew, but our blessings would sometimes be said in other languages, and that's cool too. That's good. It's good for God. It's good for us. That's what it said. So that's a good thing to wrap up with. And again, that yeah, that's the most important thing is praying from our heart. So don't worry if you don't understand all the Hebrew. Read the translation. And again, we wish everyone a Gemar Chatima Tova, a great seal in the book of life, that everyone should be sealed. And yeah, no one's coming to services now. No one's coming. No, no. We'll see. But yeah, we wish everyone a tzom call, a meaningful fast, an easy fast, and we'll see you Saturday. We'll see you Friday night. We'll see you Friday night and Saturday. It's Shabbos, and it's Yom Kippur. It's a Shabbat, and it hasn't happened in 7 years that Shabbat and Yom Kippur happened together. So take care, everybody. Be well, and all that talk about food hopefully didn't make you too hungry. Bye bye.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
Rabbi. Thanks,
Bye.
Rabbi.
Be well, everybody. Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Bye. Just thinking.